Well, about 2 weeks ago, Catholic high school history and government teacher and political activist Paul Spencer said he's forming an exploratory committee to consider a challenge to 2nd District Congressman French Hill, the Republican incumbent. Spencer, a Democrat, sat down with me for an exploratory conversation. For people who do not know Paul Spencer, who is Paul Spencer? You're a teacher and you're eyeing this potential run. You've been active on some grassroots levels with some ethics and good government issues. So
Yes, sir.
Tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a transplant to Arkansas. I'm originally from northeastern Ohio, a town called Steubenville, which is the Rust Belt. And I watched the economy of that part of the country just wither away. I think at the time when I was a child, there was about 50,000 people in my town, probably about 17,000 there now.
Wow.
So I met my wife, moved down here, and was just going to be here for a short period of time, and 20 years later, I'm still here.
It's amazing how that happens. That happens a lot in Arkansas with
Indeed.
people that come to visit. So you teach history and government at Catholic high school. Tell me a little bit about that, and also tell me too, you have been involved in some good government, some pro-ethics legislation, trying to get some stuff on the ballot, working with some legislators on a few things. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I teach at Catholic High. I teach government and politics, which is go over the Constitution. We look at post-1945 America and some of the political trends and so forth in that. U.S. history, of course, is U.S. history. And I teach medieval Europe there as well. As far as being in politics here and being an activist here, I had no desire to ever be an activist anywhere or be in politics. After 2010 and the Citizens United decision was handed down, that case really lit a fire under me to get out and advocate against that notion that corporations are people, that money was speech. And I saw that many times a lot of our problems that we face today are caused by this roar of money into politics. I always referred to it as the Aristotelian first mover of all subsequent corruptions.
Okay, that's a pretty mouthful description right there. But you have worked on trying to get a couple of things that would be prepared to limit corporate contributions to campaigns, the influence of lobbyist money at the state capitol in some of those initiatives. Some of that got worked into other proposals and worked out one way or the other. Let's talk about why you're exploring this race for the 2nd Congressional District here. What's going into this exploration? Are you definitely in and this is a formality, or are there some things that could tip your decision to run or to not run?
That's a difficult question to answer. I went into this fully prepared to go all the way through. And so far things are looking pretty positive for that. But no one knows what tomorrow holds. We saw that with the hearings today with the president and Comey rather. And everything's in flux politically. So I like to keep my option open, but I'm trending towards the run at this point in time.
All right. Let's talk about some things that you made in your announcement here. I want to read you just a little bit of a quote from something that you put out in the Exploratory Committee announcement. Currently, only the needs of special interests are being represented in the 2nd District. This is evidenced by contemptuous budget priorities, tax policy, and most recently in healthcare policy. I detected more anti-Obama sentiment in the votes to repeal the health care plan, because from some of the corporate interests and special interests I've heard, they liked Obamacare. It was working for them. It was making them money. I sense that you look at this from a different lens.
Well, Theodore Roosevelt, at one point, I'm going to butcher his words here, he said that behind the ostensible government sits enthroned a shadow government. And it holds no allegiance to the people, and it's the first responsibility of any statesman to destroy that unholy alliance, as he put it, between the corporate world and the political world. So I've always tried to remain as fairly neutral on limiting that types of money, and I've always wanted to emphasize that it's the needs of people that should be met before profit margins. So whether or not it's George Soros throwing money into a race or the Koch brothers. These are always things that I have found to be unacceptable. And just because it's been sacramentalized by the court system, I don't feel that it's necessarily the right direction that we're moving. And we need to really put the interests of the people of Arkansas and of the country. You know, we have 1 in 4 children in Arkansas are hungry. We're the second poorest state in the union. So until we can address a lot of those fundamental problems, I think that all else is intrigue. We really need to get to the roots of a lot of our problems, which I believe is unwarranted campaign money, which allows a misdirected democracy.
I sense in a lot of your rhetoric too, from what I've read in the past, what I read in your statement here, that you maybe have a little bit more of a populist vein in terms of your approach to politics. Would that be accurate?
I think that's a fair thing to say. And if you look at the original populist movement, now we have this new populism that rose up with Mr. Trump becoming president and so forth. But I think the sentiment of the first populist movement that we saw in the 1870s through the 90s and so forth has definitely, I don't want to say it's formed my opinion, but I think it's just the natural progression of how things ought to be politically. We worked, all this is a result of what Mark Twain referred to as the Gilded Age. I'm convinced that this is the second Gilded Age. It shows all the earmarks of being a second Gilded Age. And given that reality, at least the reality as I see it, that we have to kind of detach ourselves from the political realities as we see on TV and what the parties both spin, and people need to get involved at a grassroots level. And I'm seeing more and more people that aren't career politicians considering runs for public office.
Definitely a lot more activism at this point in time, probably spurred by President Trump in some ways on both sides of the aisle.
Right, and Senator Sanders as well. You had 2 populist movements working simultaneously towards a common end.
That's Paul Spencer, a potential Democratic candidate for the 2nd District Congressional seat. You can catch a bit more of that interview online at talkbusiness.net. Still to come, senior analyst Wes Brown. There's some quirky stuff happening in the state's labor pool. He and I will discuss.